Hi everybody, welcome back to Home Smart Buyers. Inspector Tom here. So hopefully you've watched a couple of the other videos. You've been able to communicate your findings and get the framing part of it fixed. Well, now the plumbers and the electricians are doing the rough end, and they are literally, they're going to chop the living shit out of your house. They're going to cut and do all kinds of craziness because they're trying to get their part of the job done fast. So we're going to talk about specifically what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, and go through some standards communicated specifically in the IRC so that you can identify them and share those issues with your builder, get them corrected before they go on to the next phase. All right, you're busy, I'm busy. Let's get rolling. So one of the first things that you got to be able to do to identify if it's correct or not, right? And we're talking about drilling holes, notching, and boring, right? And so in order to determine if it's correct or not, first you have to figure out, is the wall load bearing or not? And this is probably the easiest time to do it. It's easier than if your home was completed. Long and the short of it is, if you see a bunch of stuff going up to a second story or sitting directly on top of that wall, it's probably load bearing. If there's nothing above it except air, it's probably an interior wall and it's probably not load bearing. The reason there's a difference between what is load bearing and what is not load bearing is that the IRC draws distinctions between how big of a hole can be bored into it. So at the end of the day, if you assume everything is load bearing and it ends up not being, oh well, so you called something out to your builder and they came back and said that's not a load bearing wall. Cool, right? They did their job, you did your job, you're an actively engaged buyer, so it's all good. So let's get into some specifics around what an electrician and a plumber can do as far as an acceptable hole. We'll start there. So stay with me on this part. What sounds complex at first is super easy and super straightforward, and you can go around your house and figure out how badly, not if the plumbers and the electricians trash some at your framing, but how badly and where. All right, so here we go. We talked about load and no load. Well, let's say that we got no load. Well, you can put a hole in it of 2.1 inches. That's up to 60% of the width of that stud, and it's totally fine. Because you gotta remember, no load, it's not carrying a bunch of stuff from the roof and the weight all the way down. You can put a big notch in a 2x4 that's not carrying a load, 1.4 inches. This is a universal rule, right? Whether it's load, no load, 2x4, 2x6, it doesn't matter. 5/8 of an inch. If that hole has to be 5/8 of an inch away, end of story. Universal rule, same thing. Load, no load, 2x4, 2x6, doesn't matter. Anytime you've got an opening within 1.25 inches, you've got to have a nail guard, right? And the concern is somebody's going to come along with an 1.5 inch nail with drywall on the outside of this thing, go to hang a mirror. Next thing you know, they're piercing electrical lines, okay? So, little nail guard. Now, let's go to load. Obviously, if you got a load on this thing, you're going to want a smaller hole and a smaller notch. So, the notch size goes down to 0.875, just under an inch. The hole becomes very small, max of 40% of what's on this stud, 1.4 inches. Same universal rule, anytime you got a hole within 5/8 of an inch, got to have something on it, right? And it's called a stud shoe, and it just helps reinforce it. And same universal rule, 1.25. If it's within, that hole's within 1.25 inches, you don't want a nail hitting it, got to have a nail guard on it. Now there's some rules on this that if it's a little bit bigger than that size, well, you can put a second stud right next to it and it'll fix it. That's up to your builder, right? Point this stuff out, let your builder fix it. Let's do 2x6s now. So 2x6s, same principle, right? If no load, okay? Well, it doesn't have to carry stuff from the ceiling all the way down, so you don't have that continuous load path down to the foundation. You can put some big holes in this thing. 3.3 inches is totally acceptable. You can notch this thing 2.2 inches. Like, that's a lot. And it's totally acceptable. 2 universal rules, always the same. If this hole is within 5/8 of the edge, it's got to have a guard. It's got to have a stud shoe, okay? In this case, if it's within 1.25, it's got to have a nail guard. You don't want nails going through it. That's it. That's the no load. Load, notches get smaller, holes get smaller. So, on a 2x6, you want that notch no greater than 1.375 inches. 1.4 inches. All right, relatively small notch. Only 40% of the stud width should be that hole, 2.2 inches. Same universal rules, 5/8 of an inch from the edge. Otherwise, it needs a stud shoe. And then if it's in 1.25, you need a nail guard. That's it. So let's talk about top plates. In this case, you've got a part of the drain waste vent system passing through it. If that opening in that top plate is greater than 50% of the size, you want to have a guard on there. That guard has to be secured by 10 penny nails, 8 on each side, and it should extend 1.5 inches wider on both sides than the opening. This is like a massive guard, and they did just a great job on it. Way to go. Now, all you have to do is go out and figure out where these things are in your house. All right, let's take a look. Let's start seeing if they're doing it right. So, got an opening. There's the edge. In this case, the location and the size of it's small enough it's not structurally important. It's 1.5 inches away. Does not need a nail guard. Great job. Did an opening on the next one. It's less than 1.25 inches away. Should have a nail guard. Great job. So we've got an opening within 1.25 inches. This should have a nail guard on it. So in this case, I've got multiple uprights, multiple studs. In this one, it's farther than 1.25 inches, so this one doesn't need it. But if you take a look at this one, it's pretty darn close. It does. I would come back to the builder and say, do me a favor, throw one in here and here, at least, preferably all the way across. So this one, they've got an interior wall. Hang on, let me get my that opening is about less than 1 inch away. They don't need a nail guard on this side, but they do need one on this side. They should have put one in there prior to putting this material there. So this is a good example of an error on a top plate. You can see that they require a guard, but they've only got it secured with 2 penny nails, 10 penny nails. Those should be 8 on each side of the opening. Same thing again, you've got a penetration, you've got the guard in place, and this one's only got 2 nails securing it in place. Okay, so we've got a hole here. It's on a 2x6. It's in a load bearing. Here's my little cheater board. So it's a 2x6. The maximum hole width is 2.2, and it has to be 5/8 inch from the edge. Well, it's clearly more than 5/8 inch from the edge, and if you take a look at it, it's 2 inches. They're doing great. No need for a guard or anything. So we've got a 3-inch drain line coming through here on a top plate, and that should have not a guard, but it should have a tie plate located at the top because that hole is greater than 50% of the board width. Looking up, we've got less than 5/8 of an inch between the opening and the edge, and this is the incorrect type of tie. This is less than 1.25 inches away from the edge. Should have a guard on it. This is within 1.25 inches. It should have a nail guard on it. Always be sure to check the plumbing connections located around the bathtub. They get missed and chopped up pretty badly. So we're in a bathroom, and the plumbers just did a great job. They took a little extra time. They've spent some more time figuring out where they're drilling their holes at. They don't even need plates or guards in this case. Yeah, did it right. Good job. So this is obviously improper. In this case, the plumbing is not flush with a wall, and it obviously needs to be addressed. So one of the things that drives me a little bit crazy is you'll always see these videos of inspectors or whomever, kind of they walk into a room, they kind of look around and go, okay, it looks good. Like, I can't do that. Like, and I think since we're talking about details, right? We're talking about taking a home from being good to great. And so it's a long collection of little details. You need to walk it with a purpose. And what I always suggest is, like, mentally, if you can like carry 2 or 3 of the standards that we've talked about around, well, walk every single room you walk into, take a left turn. I don't care, do NASCAR, take right turns. I don't even know which way is which. But be consistent, like walk a room and look for those 2 or 3 things. And then go to the next room and look for those 2 or 3 things. And then go to the next room, look for those 2 or 3 things. Just the idea of walking around going, oh, I think it's good. Well, that's just, don't waste your time. Like, it really solves nothing. So to give you a sense, today's house, like, I think they did a really nice job. I think the plumbers were high and tight compared to normal. I think the electricians, they kind of backed off on the nail guards a little bit more than I like to see. But these are all pretty straightforward, easy fixes. Like, I feel pretty good about it. 47 errors. 47 errors, and that's in a good one. And there's no craziness where they literally chopped 3 or 4 studs right in a row and just basically cut them in half to put their lines in. And you see that. You see it regularly. So not all electricians and not all plumbers hate your house, but I will tell you there's some that just don't care about the framing. Hats off to these tradesmen. They did a really nice job. They need to come back, get the tape measure back out and clean up a few details, but that's it.